Maya's alarm clock had been broken for 3 weeks now, but she couldn't afford to fix it. Instead, she relied on her phone and the morning sounds from the apartment next door. Today, like most days, she was running behind schedule. She grabbed her worn canvas bag, checked that her bus pass was inside, and rushed out the door of her tiny studio apartment. The October morning air bit at her cheeks as she half walked, half jogged down the busy street. Her breath came out in small puffs of white steam. Maya worked at the Riverside Learning Center, a small nonprofit that helped adults learn to read. The pay wasn't much, barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but she loved what she did. There was something magical about watching a 50-year-old man read his first complete sentence, or seeing a grandmother finally able to help her grandchild with homework. But loving her job didn't make the financial stress any easier. Last week, her mother had called from Arizona, crying about another medical bill she couldn't pay. Maya had sent her the little money she had saved for new work shoes. Her current pair had a hole near the toe that she covered with duct tape. The coffee shop on 5th Street was always packed by 8 a.m., and today was no different. Maya usually made coffee at home to save money, but her coffee maker had given up yesterday morning with a sad little gurgle. She figured she could spare $3 for a small coffee. It would have to last her until lunch. The line stretched almost to the door. Maya checked her phone nervously. She had 15 minutes to get to work, and the bus took 12. She shifted from foot to foot, watching the baristas work quickly behind the counter. The familiar smell of roasted beans and warm pastries filled the air, making her stomach rumble. She hadn't eaten breakfast again. In front of her stood an older man, probably in his 70s. He wore a faded brown jacket that had seen better days, and his gray hair needed a trim. His hands shook slightly as he dug through his pockets, pulling out crumpled receipts and what looked like bus transfers. Maya noticed his shoes were old and worn, much like her own. "Next," called the young barista with purple hair streaks. The old man stepped forward, still searching his pockets. "Just a black coffee, please, small." The barista nodded and rang him up. "That'll be $3.50. Maya watched as the man pulled out a plastic card, the kind banks give for government assistance. His hands trembled as he handed it over. The barista swiped it once, then again. The machine beeped angrily. "I'm sorry, sir. Your card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Maya saw the man's shoulders slump. His face turned red and he started patting his pockets again desperately. I was sure there was money on there," he mumbled, loud enough for Maya to hear. "I'm sorry. I'll go." The line behind Maya was growing restless. Someone sighed loudly. A woman in a business suit checked her watch impatiently. Maya felt her chest tighten. She knew that feeling. That embarrassment of not having enough money for something as simple as coffee. She'd been there more times than she cared to remember. Without thinking, Maya stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said to the barista. "I'll pay for his coffee." The old man turned around, his eyes wide with surprise. "Oh no, miss. You don't need to do that. I can just—" "It's okay," Maya said gently, already pulling out her own card. "Really, we all have tough days." The barista looked between them and shrugged. "So that's one black coffee, and what can I get you?" "Just a small coffee, black, please," Maya said. She handed over her card, watching her coffee budget for the week disappear. But seeing the relief on the old man's face made it worth it. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me," Maya smiled. "Don't worry about it. Pay it forward when you can." They waited together for their drinks. The old man introduced himself as Henry. His voice was soft and educated, not what Maya had expected. He asked her name and thanked her again. "What do you do for work?" Henry asked, seeming genuinely interested. "I work at a literacy center," Maya explained, accepting her coffee from the barista. "We help adults learn to read and write. It's not glamorous, but I love it." Henry's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. Education is so important. How long have you been doing that?" "About 3 years now," Maya said, glancing at her phone. She needed to leave, but there was something kind about this man that made her want to keep talking. "We help people who never got the chance to learn, or who need to improve their skills for work." "That must be very rewarding," Henry said. "And challenging." "It is," Maya agreed. "Some of our students are older than my parents, finally learning to read for the first time. Yesterday, one of my students read a bedtime story to her grandson for the first time in her life. She cried, and I did too. Henry nodded slowly, as if filing away every word she said. You must be very dedicated. Maya felt her cheeks warm. I just think everyone deserves a chance, you know? Indeed they do, Henry said thoughtfully. Maya's phone buzzed with a reminder. Oh gosh, I have to run. I'm already late for work. She paused, looking at Henry. Are you okay? I mean, do you need anything else? Henry shook his head, holding up his coffee cup. You've done more than enough. Thank you again, Maya. You've made an old man's day much brighter. As Maya hurried toward the door, she didn't notice the well-dressed woman sitting alone at a corner table. The woman had perfectly styled gray hair and wore an expensive-looking coat. She had been watching the entire exchange with great interest, occasionally making notes on a small pad. When Maya disappeared out the door, the woman pulled out her phone and dialed a number. It's Catherine, she said quietly into the phone. Yes, I saw the whole thing. She didn't hesitate for a second. No, she clearly doesn't have much money herself, but she paid anyway. Yes, sir. I think you found exactly what you were looking for. Henry had also noticed Catherine, giving her a small nod before he too left the coffee shop. But unlike Maya, who rushed to catch her bus, Henry walked slowly and deliberately down the street, a small smile playing on his lips. Maya made it to work with 2 minutes to spare, her coffee still warm in her hands. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness would change her life forever. She just knew that she'd helped someone who needed it, and that felt good. As she unlocked the door to the learning center, she thought about Henry and hoped his day would get better. She never could have imagined that he was already planning ways to make her day and her life infinitely better in return. 3 days later, Maya walked into the same coffee shop, hoping her morning would start better than the previous one. Her apartment's heating had gone out during the night, and she'd woken up shivering under 2 blankets. The repair would cost money she didn't have, so she'd have to wait until her next paycheck and hope for the best. As she joined the line, she spotted a familiar figure near the counter. Henry stood there with his black coffee, looking around the busy shop. When he saw her, his weathered face broke into a genuine smile. Maya, how wonderful to see you again, he said, walking over to her spot in line. Hi, Henry, Maya replied, surprised by how happy she felt to see him. How are you doing? Much better, thanks to you, he said. I wanted to tell you that coffee the other day got me through a very difficult morning. Sometimes it's the small kindnesses that matter most. Maya felt her cheeks warm. Anyone would have done the same thing. Henry shook his head slowly. I'm afraid that's not true. I've been around long enough to know that kindness like yours is rare. They sat together at a small table near the window. Henry asked about her work again, and Maya found herself telling him about Mrs. Rodriguez, a 62-year-old grandmother who had just learned to write her own name. She cried when she signed it, Maya said, stirring her coffee. She told me she'd been making X marks her whole life, feeling ashamed every time. Yesterday she wrote Rosa Rodriguez in shaky but beautiful letters. You gave her dignity, Henry said quietly. That's priceless. Something in his tone made Maya look up. Henry was watching her with an intensity that seemed unusual for casual conversation. But then he smiled and asked about other students, and the moment passed. 2 weeks later, Maya's old Honda finally gave up completely. She'd been nursing it along for months, adding oil and praying it would start each morning. When it died in the parking lot outside her apartment, she knew she couldn't afford the repairs the mechanic quoted. $800 might as well have been $8,000. That Monday morning, Maya walked the 2 miles to work. Her feet hurt by the time she reached the learning center, but she told herself it was good exercise. She'd have to leave earlier each day, but it was manageable. At lunchtime, she walked to the coffee shop instead of driving. The walk took 20 minutes each way, eating into her lunch break. But she'd started looking forward to these brief escapes from work stress. Henry was there again, almost like he was waiting for her. They'd fallen into an easy routine over the past few weeks. He'd buy his coffee, she'd get hers, and they'd sit together for 10 or 15 minutes talking about books, life, and her students. You're walking today, Henry observed as she sat down. Slightly out of breath. Car trouble, Maya said simply. She didn't want to complain or make Henry feel uncomfortable about money again. I'm sorry to hear that. Cars can be expensive to fix. Maya nodded, sipping her coffee. It's... okay. Walking is probably better for me anyway. What she didn't tell Henry was that her landlord had called that morning. Rent was due in 5 days and she was short by $200. She'd sent money to her mother again last week when her mom's prescription costs went up. Maya had been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner to stretch her grocery budget, but it wasn't enough. "Tell me about the book you mentioned last week," Henry said, changing the subject smoothly. "The one about teaching adult literacy." Maya's face lit up despite her worries. She loved talking about her work, and Henry always seemed genuinely interested. "It's called Opening Doors to Learning," she said. The author worked with adults in rural communities who never had access to education. Some of the stories are just incredible, such as, there's this man, Thomas, who was 60 when he first learned to read. He'd hidden it from everyone his whole life, even his wife. He became so good that he started teaching other adults in his community. Maya's voice grew animated. The author says Thomas told her that learning to read didn't just change what he could do, it changed who he was. Henry leaned forward, hanging on every word. "That's remarkable. You must see similar transformations in your work. All the time," Maya said. "Last month, one of my students got promoted at his job because he could finally fill out reports properly. Another woman was able to help her daughter with homework for the first time. It's like watching people discover a whole new world." "And what got you interested in this field?" Henry asked. Maya was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "My dad," she said finally. "He dropped out of school in 3rd grade to work on his family's farm. He was brilliant, but he never learned to read well. I used to watch him pretend to read menus in restaurants or nod along when people talked about things in newspapers. He was ashamed, but he didn't know where to get help." "Did he ever learn?" "No," Maya said softly. "He passed away when I was in college. But I promised myself I'd help people like him, people who just needed someone to believe in them and give them a chance." Henry was quiet for a long moment. When Maya looked up, she was surprised to see his eyes looked misty. "Your father would be very proud of you," he said. After that day, Maya noticed Henry around the neighborhood more often. She'd see him at the bus stop when she walked to work, or at the small grocery store where she shopped. He always greeted her warmly, sometimes walking with her for a few blocks. One Thursday morning, Maya was rushing to work when she saw an elderly tourist looking lost on the corner near the coffee shop. The woman was holding a map and looked confused. "Excuse me," the woman said as Maya approached. "I'm trying to find the art museum. My grandson said it was around here somewhere." Maya was already running late, but she stopped anyway. "Oh, it's about 6 blocks that way," she said, pointing east. "But the streets are tricky. Here, let me draw you a quick map." She pulled out a pen and drew directions on the back of a receipt from her pocket. "The museum opens at 10, so you have plenty of time. And there's a lovely cafe inside if you want to rest when you get there." The woman beamed. "You're so kind, dear. Thank you so much." Maya hurried on to work, not noticing Henry watching from across the street. He'd seen the whole interaction, just as he'd observed her help a young mother with a heavy stroller up the subway stairs last week, and give directions to 3 different lost visitors over the past month. That afternoon, Maya's phone rang while she was teaching a reading class. She let it go to voicemail, but during her break she listened to the message. It was her landlord again, reminding her about the rent and mentioning that other people were interested in her apartment if she couldn't pay. Maya sat in her empty classroom, staring at the message on her phone. She'd managed to scrape together most of the rent money, but she was still $50 short. Her next paycheck wouldn't come for another week. She thought about calling her mother, but she knew her mom was struggling too. Maya had been the one sending money to Arizona, not the other way around. Maybe she could sell something, but she didn't own anything valuable. Her laptop was old and probably wouldn't bring much money. Her few pieces of jewelry were worth more in memories than dollars. For the first time since she'd started this job, Maya wondered if she'd have to look for something that paid better, even if it meant leaving work she loved. The thought made her stomach hurt. She packed up her things slowly, dreading the walk home to her cold apartment and another peanut butter sandwich dinner. But tomorrow she'd be back at the coffee shop, and maybe Henry would be there with one of his thoughtful questions and gentle smile. Small comforts, she reminded herself, sometimes made all the difference. Henry Chen sat in his downtown penthouse office, staring out at the city below through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 73, he'd built one of the most successful technology companies in the world, but success had come with a price. For the past 15 years, every person who approached him wanted something: money, connections, business deals, charity donations. Even his own family seemed to see dollar signs when they looked at him. His nephew called only when he needed money. His late wife's friends invited him to parties, then spent the evening pitching their favorite causes. He'd grown tired of wondering whether anyone would care about him if he lost everything tomorrow. 6 months ago, Henry had started what he privately called his experiment. He'd begun visiting different neighborhoods around the city, dressing in old clothes and observing how people treated someone who appeared to have nothing. The results had been disappointing. Most people ignored him. Some were rude. A few were kind, but only when it was convenient. Then he'd met Maya. Henry pulled out a small notebook where he'd been writing observations. The first entry was from 3 weeks ago. Young woman, maybe late 20s, paid for coffee without hesitation. Didn't ask for recognition or thanks. Seemed genuinely concerned for a stranger's well-being. Since then, the entries had multiplied. Henry had been spending more time in Maya's neighborhood, and what he'd witnessed had surprised him. This wasn't someone being kind for show. Maya helped people when she thought no one was watching. Last Tuesday, Henry had been sitting on a park bench when he saw Maya walking home from work. An older man dropped his wallet without noticing. Maya could have kept walking, but instead she jogged after him for 2 blocks to return it. The man offered her a $20 bill as a reward, which she politely refused. "Keep your money," Henry had heard her say. "I'm just glad I saw it fall." 2 days later, Henry had watched Maya give her lunch to a homeless veteran outside the library. She'd sat with the man for 10 minutes asking his name and listening to his stories. When she left, Henry followed at a distance and saw her go into a convenience store. She bought a small bag of chips and a bottle of water for her own lunch. Henry's assistant, Catherine, had been helping with the observations, positioning herself in places where Maya might appear. Last week, Catherine had watched Maya spend her entire lunch break helping an elderly woman figure out the bus schedule. Maya had walked the woman to the correct bus stop and waited with her until the bus arrived, making herself late for work. "She's genuine," Catherine had reported back. "I've been watching people for 30 years, Mr. Chen. This young woman isn't putting on an act." Henry made another entry in his notebook. Maya's car broke down. She's walking to work now, about 2 miles each way. Still stops to help others despite her own struggles. What fascinated Henry most was Maya's attitude about her financial problems. She never complained, never asked for help, never seemed bitter about her circumstances. Yesterday, he'd overheard her talking to another teacher at the learning center about her broken heating. "I have extra blankets," she'd said cheerfully, "and it won't be cold forever." Henry decided to test Maya's character more directly. That afternoon, he arranged for Catherine to stage a small scene outside the coffee shop. Catherine would pretend to be a confused tourist needing directions, then accidentally drop her wallet after Maya helped her. The next morning, Henry watched from across the street as Maya left the coffee shop. Right on schedule, Catherine approached her, looking lost and holding a map. "Excuse me, miss? I'm trying to find the History Museum. My phone died and I'm completely turned around." Henry watched Maya stop immediately, even though she was clearly in a hurry. She spent several minutes drawing a detailed map on a piece of paper, explaining the best route and warning Catherine about construction on one of the streets. As they parted ways, Catherine pretended to stumble, dropping her wallet behind a parked car where Maya couldn't see it fall. Henry held his breath, wondering if Maya would notice and take the wallet, but Maya simply continued on her way, having no idea the wallet had been dropped. The test had failed, but in exactly the way Henry had hoped. Maya couldn't be dishonest about something she didn't know existed. Catherine retrieved her wallet and called Henry. "She's the real thing, Mr. Chen. I've never seen anyone so genuinely helpful to strangers." That evening, Henry decided on a more direct test. He asked Catherine to research Maya's background more thoroughly. What they discovered impressed him even more. Maya had graduated from college with honors but chose nonprofit work over higher-paying corporate jobs. She'd turned down 3 offers from private tutoring companies that would have doubled her salary. Her credit report showed she was struggling financially, but she had no history of borrowing money or asking for help. Most interesting was what they learned about her family. Maya's mother lived in Arizona on disability payments, and Maya had been sending her money regularly for 2 years. Medical bills, prescription costs, household repairs. Maya somehow found money to help her mother even when she could barely pay her own rent. "Sir," Catherine said during their phone call, "I found something else." Maya volunteers at the Children's Hospital on Saturdays, reading to kids who are stuck in bed. She's been doing it for over a year. The volunteer coordinator says Maya never misses a week, rain or shine. Henry felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine respect for another person. Here was someone who gave freely of her time, money, and energy, without expecting anything in return. Someone who helped strangers and cared for family members who couldn't help her back. Someone who found joy in teaching others to read, even though it barely paid her bills. The next morning, Henry arrived at the coffee shop early and watched Maya walk in. She looked tired, and he noticed her shoes were even more worn than before, but she smiled at the barista and said good morning to another regular customer, as if she didn't have a care in the world. When Maya sat down with her coffee, Henry joined her at the small table. "You look tired today," he said gently. Maya shrugged. "Just a long week." "How are you, Henry?" "I'm well, thank you." "Maya, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, though she looked curious about the change in his tone. "Why do you do this work? Teaching adults to read, I mean. You could make more money doing other things." Maya was quiet for a moment, sipping her coffee. "I guess because everyone deserves a second chance to learn. Money isn't everything, you know? Some of my students are grandparents who want to read bedtime stories to their grandchildren for the first time. Others are trying to get better jobs to support their families. How do you put a price on that?" "But you're struggling financially," Henry said carefully. "Wouldn't it be easier to take a higher-paying job?" Maya looked at him with surprise. "How did you know I was struggling?" Henry realized he'd revealed more than he intended. "I noticed things," he said. "Your car, walking to work, the way you count your change carefully." Maya's cheeks reddened slightly, but she didn't seem angry. "I'm managing okay, and honestly, I can't imagine doing anything else. My students need someone who believes in them. Everyone else in their lives has probably told them they're too old to learn, or not smart enough, or that it's too late. I get to be the person who tells them they're wrong." Henry felt his chest tighten with emotion. Here was someone who had chosen purpose over profit, kindness over comfort. In a world where everyone seemed to want more money, more recognition, more success, Maya had chosen to make less money helping others succeed. That afternoon, Henry made a decision that would change both their lives forever. It was time to reveal who he really was. Maya barely slept that night. Her landlord had called again, and this time his message was clear. Pay the full rent by Friday or find somewhere else to live. She'd counted and recounted her money, but she was still $40 short. Her mother had called too, needing money for a prescription that her insurance wouldn't cover. Thursday morning, Maya dragged herself to the coffee shop, hoping the familiar routine would calm her nerves. She had 2 days to figure out how to keep her apartment, and no idea where the money would come from. Henry was there already, sitting at their usual table, but something was different. He wore a crisp navy suit instead of his usual worn jacket. His hair was neatly trimmed, and he looked somehow younger and more alert. Next to him sat an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and a designer coat. Maya hesitated in the doorway. Henry looked so different that for a moment she wondered if she'd made a mistake. But then he looked up and smiled, and she recognized his kind eyes. "Maya, please come sit with us," Henry called out. Confused but curious, Maya bought her coffee and walked over to the table. The woman stood and extended her hand with a professional smile. "Maya, I'm Catherine, Henry's assistant. I've heard wonderful things about you." "Assistant?" Maya shook Catherine's hand, feeling completely lost. "I'm sorry, I think there might be some confusion." "Henry, what's going on?" Henry gestured for her to sit down. His expression was serious, almost nervous. "Maya, I need to tell you something important, and I hope you'll give me a chance to explain everything." Maya sat down slowly, her coffee forgotten. Something in Henry's tone made her stomach twist with worry. "My full name is Henry Chen," he began. "I own Chen Technologies. Perhaps you've heard of it?" Maya's eyes widened. Everyone had heard of Chen Technologies. It was one of the biggest tech companies in the world. Their logo was on half the electronics in her apartment. "I don't understand," Maya said quietly. "Why are you telling me this?" Henry took a deep breath. "Because for the past 6 months I've been conducting an experiment. I've been visiting different neighborhoods, dressing like someone who has nothing to see how people treat strangers who appear to need help." Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "An experiment?" "Maya, please let me explain," Henry said quickly, seeing her expression change. I've spent years being surrounded by people who only care about my money. I wanted to know if genuine kindness still existed in the world. So you've been lying to me, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. This whole time you've been studying me like some kind of lab rat. No, it wasn't like that, Henry protested. Yes, it started as an observation, but Maya, you have to understand what I witnessed. Catherine opened a leather folder and pulled out several photographs. Maya gasped when she saw them. Pictures of her helping the elderly woman with directions, giving her lunch to the homeless veteran, chasing after the man who dropped his wallet. You had people following me? Maya's voice rose slightly and other customers looked over. Maya, please, just listen, Henry said desperately. That first day when you paid for my coffee, Catherine was there by chance. But what you did was so unusual that I asked her to observe more. Catherine leaned forward. Maya, I've been working with wealthy people for 30 years. I've seen every kind of fake kindness you can imagine. But what you did, what you continue to do, it's real. You help people when you think no one is watching. Maya shook her head, feeling sick. So you've been testing me, seeing if the poor girl would steal your wallet or ask for money? The wallet test proved you wouldn't take something that wasn't yours, Henry said. But that wasn't the point anymore. The point was that every single day you choose to help others even though you're struggling yourself. Maya stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't believe this. I thought you were my friend. I told you about my father, my students, my life, and the whole time you were just collecting data on me. Maya, please sit down, Henry pleaded. You are my friend. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Friends don't lie to each other for months, Maya said, her eyes filling with tears. Friends don't hire people to spy on each other. She turned to leave, but Henry's voice stopped her. Your mother needs $400 for her medication, he said quietly. Your rent is $40 short and you haven't eaten a real meal in days. Maya spun around, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. How dare you investigate my personal life? Because I care about you, Henry said, standing up. Maya, in 6 months of watching people, you're the only person I met who gave without expecting anything back. You're the only person who was kind to a stranger just because it was the right thing to do. So now you want to reward me like a good dog who did tricks? Maya's voice was shaking. Catherine spoke up gently. Maya, may I tell you what Mr. Chen has been saying about you? Maya didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. He calls you the most genuinely good person he's ever met. He said watching you help others has restored his faith in humanity. Yesterday he told me he wishes he had a daughter like you. Henry's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Maya, I started this as an experiment, yes. But somewhere along the way our conversations became the best part of my day. Learning about your students, hearing about your father, watching you light up when you talk about helping others read their first words. None of that was fake. But you were fake, Maya said, though her anger seemed to be wavering. Everything about you was a lie. Not everything, Henry said. My interest in your work was real. My admiration for what you do was real. My enjoyment of our talks was real. The only thing I lied about was my bank account. Maya sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. Why are you telling me this now? Henry exchanged a look with Catherine. Because the Riverside Learning Center is going to close next month. Funding has been cut and they can't afford to stay open. Maya's face went white. What, how do you know that? I looked into it after you mentioned the budget problems, Henry said. Maya, 15 adults are currently learning to read because of that program. Mrs. Rodriguez, the grandmother who learned to write her name, she'll have nowhere to go. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. I haven't been told yet. Your director is trying to find a way to break the news to the staff, Catherine said softly. He's been losing sleep over it. Maya put her head in her hands. So I'll lose my job and my apartment in the same month. Perfect. Henry reached across the table and gently touched her arm. Maya, I want to help. Not because you're my experiment, but because you're my friend. Because what you do matters. Because people like Mrs. Rodriguez deserve to learn. And people like you deserve to teach them. Maya looked up at him through her tears. Help how? Let me fund the learning center. Let me make sure it not only stays open but can help even more people. Let me pay your rent and your mother's medical bills, not as charity, but as an investment in the most worthwhile person I've ever met. Maya stared at him for a long moment. And what would you want in return? Henry smiled, the same gentle smile she'd come to know over their many coffee shop conversations. Just be my friend. The real kind of friend, who knew me before they knew my net worth. That's worth more to me than any amount of money. Maya didn't answer Henry right away. She sat in the coffee shop, staring at her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, trying to process everything she'd just learned. The man she'd been having friendly conversations with for weeks was one of the richest people in the world. The simple act of buying him coffee had somehow led to this moment. "I need time to think," she said finally. Henry nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need." "But the learning center," Maya said, looking up with worry in her eyes. "My students. If it really is closing next month, nothing will happen to the center or your students while you're deciding," Henry promised. "I can make sure of that." Maya studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. But the eyes looking back at her were the same kind eyes she'd come to know. Maybe he had more money than she'd imagined. Maybe he'd started their friendship under false pretenses. But the person who listened to her stories about her students and asked thoughtful questions about her father seemed real. "Okay," she said quietly. "Give me a few days." That evening, Maya sat in her cold apartment wrapped in blankets trying to figure out what to do. Part of her was angry about the deception. Part of her was embarrassed that she'd been observed and studied without knowing it. But another part of her remembered the genuine interest in Henry's voice when she talked about her work, and the way his eyes lit up when she told him about her students' successes. The next morning, Maya got the news she'd been dreading. Her director, Linda, called all the teachers into the small conference room at the learning center. "I'm afraid I have bad news," Linda said, her voice shaking. "The state has cut our funding. We'll have to close at the end of next month." The room erupted in shocked voices. Maya felt sick thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez, who was just starting to gain confidence with her reading, about James, the construction worker who was trying to get his GED, about Carmen, the young mother who wanted to read bedtime stories to her children. "What about our students?" asked Tom, another teacher. "Some of them have been working on this for years." Linda wiped her eyes. "I'm trying to find other programs that might take them, but most places have waiting lists." Maya walked home that afternoon feeling defeated. 15 people were counting on the learning center. They'd trusted her to help them achieve their dreams, and now she'd have to tell them it was over. That night, her phone rang. It was Henry. "Maya, I heard about the announcement today. How are you holding up?" "How did you already know?" Maya asked, though she wasn't really surprised anymore. "Catherine heard from someone who knows your director. Maya, those students need you, and you need to keep doing the work you love." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Henry, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "In all those weeks we talked, was any of it real for you? Or was I just part of your experiment the whole time?" Henry's voice was soft when he answered. "Maya, I've been lonely for a very long time. When you have as much money as I do, people treat you differently. They tell you what they think you want to hear. They're careful around you. But you never did that. You talked to me like I was just a regular person who happened to like coffee and conversation." "You were just a regular person to me," Maya said. "That's the point. You lied about who you were. I know, and I'm sorry. But Maya, the person you got to know, the one who enjoyed hearing about your students and asked about your father, that was the real me, maybe more real than I've been with anyone in years." Maya found herself smiling despite everything. "You really care about the literacy work, don't you? It's not just about helping me." "I care about it because you care about it," Henry said. "And because I've learned that what you do changes lives in ways that all my technology companies never could." Maya made her decision. "Okay, Henry, but if we're going to do this, we do it as partners, not as some rich guy helping a charity case." "Partners," Henry agreed immediately. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to expand the program," Maya said, surprised by her own boldness. "Not just keep it running, but make it better. More teachers, more students, maybe even multiple locations. If you really believe in what we do, let's do it right." 3 months later, Maya stood in front of a beautiful new building with a sign that read Chen Rodriguez Learning Foundation. She'd insisted on including Mrs. Rodriguez's name after the older woman became one of their volunteer reading mentors. The new center had 5 full-time teachers, 2 part-time counselors, and could serve 60 students at a time. They had a computer lab, a small library, and even a daycare room so parents could bring their children while they learned. Henry had thrown himself into the project with enthusiasm that surprised even Maya. He attended board meetings, visited classes, and had even started tutoring students himself. Watching a billionaire patiently help a grandmother sound out words had become a regular sight at the center. You know, Maya said to Henry as they watched Mrs. Rodriguez read a story to a group of new students. I never thanked you properly. Henry shook his head. Maya, I should be thanking you. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope that people can be good just because it's right, not because of what they might get in return. Maya smiled. You know what the funny thing is? I still buy coffee for people in line sometimes, just random strangers who look like they could use a small kindness. And none of them have turned out to be secret millionaires yet, Maya laughed. But that's okay. I'm not doing it for the reward. Henry laughed too. That's exactly why it worked with us. 6 months after the foundation opened, Maya was grading papers in her new office when Catherine knocked on her door. Maya, there's someone here to see you. A middle-aged man stood in the lobby, holding the hand of a small girl who couldn't have been more than 6. Are you Maya? He asked. I'm David. Mrs. Rodriguez is my mother. Maya smiled. She talks about you all the time. How's her reading coming along? That's why I'm here, David said, his eyes bright with tears. Last night she read my daughter a bedtime story. The whole story, start to finish, without any help. It was the first time in my life I ever heard my mother read out loud. He paused, struggling with his emotions. She told me about the lady who believed in her when no one else would, the teacher who told her it was never too late to learn. The little girl tugged on Maya's sleeve. My grandma reads to me now, she said proudly. She says learning is like magic. That evening, Maya and Henry sat in the same coffee shop where they'd first met, at the same small table by the window. Maya had just finished telling him about David's visit. Mrs. Rodriguez is right, Henry said. Learning is like magic, but so is kindness. Maya nodded, thinking about how a $3.50 coffee had changed both their lives and touched so many others. You know what I learned from all this? What's that? The smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest changes. You never know who might need exactly what you have to give exactly when you have it to give. Henry raised his coffee cup. To small kindnesses and big changes. Maya clinked her cup against his. And to friendships that start with coffee and grow into something beautiful. Outside, the afternoon sun streamed through the coffee shop windows, warming their faces as they planned the next expansion of their learning foundation. Neither of them noticed the young man in line behind them quietly pay for an elderly woman's coffee, but they would have smiled if they had. After all, kindness has a way of spreading, one small act at a time.